The great station floated in the darkness between stars. It was old, older than most species could remember. The metal walls had seen 12,000 years of peace, and the beings who walked its halls believed that peace would last forever. They called themselves the Galactic Concord, a union of 700 star systems bound together by trade, diplomacy, and one unbreakable rule: never wake the humans. Kethvara moved through the empty corridor with quiet steps. Her blue skin caught the dim emergency lights as she passed, making her look like a ghost drifting through the station's night cycle. She was an ambassador of the Varani people, respected and trusted by the Council of Elders. But tonight, she was breaking every law that mattered. The restricted section of the archives sat at the heart of the station. Most species did not even know it existed. The Elders kept it hidden, protected by codes and guards and ancient technology that could vaporize anyone who approached without permission. Kethvara had spent 3 years earning that permission. She had smiled at the right people, asked the right questions, and waited for the right moment. That moment was now. The door opened with a soft hiss. Inside, the room was cold and dark. Rows of data crystals lined the walls, each one containing the records of a dead or dangerous species. Some had destroyed themselves. Others had been destroyed by the Concord. A few had simply vanished into the black spaces between galaxies, never to be seen again. Kethvara walked past them all. She was looking for one file, the most restricted record in the entire archive. It took her almost an hour to find it, hidden behind layers of encryption that would have stopped anyone else. But Kethvara was patient and she was clever, and she had been planning this for a very long time. The file was labeled Sol 3. Humanity. She opened it with trembling fingers. The holographic display flickered to life, and suddenly the room was filled with images. She saw a blue planet covered in water and green land. She saw cities rising from nothing, growing tall and bright. She saw wars, terrible wars that burned across continents and left nothing but ash. And she saw the people who lived through it all. They looked so fragile. 2 arms, 2 legs, soft skin that could be cut by something as simple as a sharp stone. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no venom or claws. By all logic, they should have been prey. They should have been nothing, but they were not nothing. The records showed their history in terrible detail. They had learned to use fire before they learned to farm. They had built weapons before they built homes. They fought each other constantly, generation after generation, war after war. And yet, they never stopped growing. They never stopped learning. Every time they fell, they stood back up and reached for something higher. Kethvara watched as they split the atom and turned it into a bomb. She watched as they walked on their own moon, leaving footprints in the dust. She watched as they sent machines to the edges of their solar system, searching for something, anything, beyond their tiny world. The final entry in the file was a warning. It was written by an elder who had died long before Kethvara was born, and the words made her blood run cold. Humanity must never be contacted. They must never know we exist. They are not like the other species we have encountered. They do not seek peace. They do not seek understanding. They seek only to grow, to expand, to become more than they are. If they ever reach the stars, they will not stop until they have claimed them all. Seal them away. Let them sleep. And pray they never wake. Kethvara read the warning 3 times. Then she closed the file and stood in the darkness for a long moment, thinking about what she had learned. The Elders were afraid. The most powerful beings in the galaxy, creatures who had lived for thousands of years and seen the rise and fall of empires, were afraid of a species that had not even left its own planet. That fear had kept humanity locked away for centuries, trapped on their little blue world with no idea that the universe was watching them. But Kethvara had not come to the archive out of simple curiosity. She had come because of a signal. 3 weeks ago, her personal scanner had picked up something strange. It was a transmission, very old and very faint, coming from the third planet's moon. Someone had left something there, buried beneath the dust and rock. Something that predated the Concorde itself. The elders would never investigate. They were too afraid. They would let the mystery rot in the darkness forever rather than risk waking the sleeping giant below Dot. But Kethvara could not let it go. She needed to know what was hidden on that moon. She needed to know who had put it there, and why. And the only way to find out was to ask the humans themselves. She returned to her quarters and sat before her personal terminal. The words of the warning echoed in her mind, but she pushed them aside. Fear had kept the galaxy frozen for 12,000 years. Fear had prevented contact with countless species. Some of them might have become friends or allies. Fear was a prison, and Kethvara was tired of living inside it. She composed a message. It was simple, mathematical, designed to be understood by any intelligent species. It contained her name, her location, and a single question. What is buried on your moon? Her finger hovered over the transmit button. She knew that pressing it would change everything. She knew that the elders would find out, eventually. She knew that the punishment for what she was about to do was death. She pressed the button anyway. The message flew across the void at the speed of light. It passed through the cold darkness between stars, crossing distances that would take a human lifetime to travel. And then it reached the little blue planet, where billions of fragile creatures lived their short lives without any idea of what was coming. 3 days later, Kethvara received a reply. It was not mathematical. It was not careful or diplomatic. It was written in a language she had never seen before, crude and direct, and somehow beautiful in its simplicity. We hear you. We are coming. Kethvara stared at the words until her eyes burned. She did not know whether to laugh or cry. She had done it. She had broken the oldest law in the galaxy. She had woken the humans. And now, for better or worse, everything was about to change. Lisa Monroe had seen many strange things in her 15 years with NASA. She had watched rockets explode on the launch pad. She had floated in zero gravity while Earth spun below her like a blue marble. She had walked on the surface of Mars and planted a flag in the red dust. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for this. The message had arrived on a Tuesday morning. The radio telescopes at the Arecibo Observatory had picked it up first, a stream of mathematical patterns that could not possibly be natural. Within hours, every government on Earth knew about it. Within days, the whole world was talking about nothing else. They were not alone. Lisa stood in the crowded conference room at NASA headquarters, watching the chaos unfold around her. Scientists argued in one corner. Politicians shouted into phones in another. Military officers studied maps and charts, trying to figure out where the signal had come from and what it meant. But Lisa already knew what it meant. Someone out there had asked the question, and humanity needed to answer. The response took 3 weeks to compose. Linguists, mathematicians, and philosophers worked together to create a message that would represent all of humanity. They wanted to seem peaceful. They wanted to seem wise. They wanted to make a good first impression on whoever was listening. In the end, they sent 5 words. We hear you. We are coming. It was not peaceful. It was not wise. It was pure, stubborn human confidence. And Lisa loved every word of it. The next 6 months were the busiest of her life. The signal had contained more than just a question. Buried deep in the transmission was a pattern, a mathematical formula that described something incredible. It took the world's best scientists only 2 months to understand it. Faster than light travel was possible, and the signal had shown them how. The ship was built in orbit, piece by piece. They called it the Horizon, and it was the most advanced machine humanity had ever created. Lisa was chosen to command it. She picked her crew carefully, 12 of the best pilots, engineers, and scientists on Earth. They trained together, lived together, and prepared for a journey that no human had ever attempted. On the day of launch, Lisa stood at the observation window and looked down at the planet below. She could see the coastline of North America, the green forests and brown deserts stretching toward the horizon. She could see city lights beginning to twinkle as night crept across the surface. She could see everything she was leaving behind. Commander. The voice belonged to Danny Ortiz, her second in command. He was young, barely 30, with dark eyes and an easy smile that made everyone around him feel calm. "We're ready to go." Lisa nodded. She took one last look at Earth, then turned and walked toward the bridge. The jump was strange. There was no sensation of movement, no feeling of acceleration. One moment they were floating above Earth. The next, they were somewhere else entirely. The stars outside the windows had changed, rearranged themselves into unfamiliar patterns. They had crossed light years in the blink of an eye. "Contact," said Maria Santos, the ship's communications officer. Her voice was steady, but Lisa could see her hands shaking. "I'm picking up multiple signals, ships, dozens of them." Lisa moved to the main display. The screen filled with icons, each one representing a vessel larger than anything humanity had ever built. They were arranged in a perfect formation, blocking the path between the horizon and the distant stars. "They're hailing us," Maria said. Lisa straightened her uniform. This was the moment everything had been building toward. First contact with an alien civilization. She had imagined it 1,000 times, practiced what she would say, how she would act. But now that it was actually happening, all her preparation felt worthless. "Put them through," she said. The screen flickered. And then Lisa found herself looking at something that was definitely not human. Elder Primarch Zorvith was massive. His body was made of crystal and light, constantly shifting and rearranging itself into new patterns. He had no face, no eyes, no mouth. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You should not be here," Zorvith said. "Your species was sealed away for a reason. You were meant to sleep until the stars themselves grew cold." Lisa felt a flash of anger. She had crossed impossible distances, risked her life and the lives of her crew, and this was how she was greeted. With fear and condemnation? "We got your message," she said. "We came to talk." "The message was a mistake," Zorvith replied. "The one who sent it will be punished. You will return to your world and forget this ever happened." Lisa looked at the fleet surrounding her ship. She counted the weapons pointed at the horizon, calculated the odds of survival if this turned into a fight. The numbers were not good, but Lisa Monroe had not crossed the galaxy to turn back at the first sign of trouble. "No," she said simply. The word hung in the air. Zorvith's crystalline form flickered with surprise. In 9,000 years of existence, no one had ever said no to him so directly. "You do not understand your position," he said. "We could destroy your vessel with a single command." "You could," Lisa agreed. "But you won't. Why not?" Lisa smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had already figured out the game and was 3 moves ahead. "Because you're afraid of us," she said. "You've been afraid of us for 12,000 years. And if you were going to destroy us, you would have done it already. You wouldn't have sent a fleet. You wouldn't have tried to talk. You would have just wiped us out while we slept." Zorvith was silent for a long moment. "You want something from us," Lisa continued. "I don't know what it is yet, but I'm willing to listen. That's more than you've offered us so far." The fleet remained motionless. The weapons stayed pointed at the horizon, but no one fired. Finally, Zorvith spoke again. His voice was quieter now, almost thoughtful. "Dock your vessel at the station," he said. "We will talk." Lisa let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. The first test was over. Humanity had passed, but as the horizon moved toward the ancient station floating in the darkness, Lisa knew that the real challenges were just beginning. The council chamber was the largest room Kethvara had ever seen. It stretched upward into darkness, its walls lined with thousands of seats filled with representatives from every species in the Concord. Light came from floating orbs that drifted near the ceiling like tiny suns. At the center of it all stood a single platform where the accused would face judgment. Kethvara walked to that platform with her head held high. She knew what was coming. She had known since the moment she pressed the transmit button. The punishment for contacting a sealed species was death. There would be no appeal, no mercy, no second chances. But she did not regret what she had done. The Council of Elders sat in a raised section at the front of the chamber. There were 7 of them, being so old that they had watched stars be born and die. Zorvith was the eldest, his crystalline form glowing with cold light. Beside him sat creatures of metal, of gas, of pure energy. They had seen everything the galaxy had to offer. They thought they knew all its secrets. They were wrong. Kethvara of the Vorani, Zorva's voice echoed through the chamber. "You stand accused of breaking the first law of the Concord. You contacted the sealed species known as humanity. You have brought them to our space. How do you answer?" Kethvara looked up at the ancient being. She felt small and fragile standing before him, but she refused to look away. "I answer that I did what was necessary," she said. "The law you speak of was written out of fear. It has kept us blind and ignorant for 12,000 years. It was time for that to change." A murmur ran through the crowd. No one had ever challenged the elders so directly. Zorvith's form flickered with what might have been anger. "You do not understand what you have done," he said. "Let me show you." The lights in the chamber dimmed. A holographic display appeared above the central platform, filling the air with images. Kethvara recognized them immediately. They were the same records she had found in the archive, the same history she had studied in secret. But seeing them here, surrounded by thousands of watching eyes, made them feel different. More real, more terrible. The display showed human history in all its violence and chaos. Wars fought with swords and spears. Wars fought with guns and bombs. Cities burning. Bodies piled in mass graves. Mushroom clouds rising over flattened landscapes. The images went on, a never-ending parade of destruction. "This is humanity," Zorvith said. "They have been killing each other since before they learned to speak. They split the atom and immediately used it as a weapon. They poisoned their own planet for profit. They cannot even achieve peace among themselves. What makes you think they will offer peace to us?" Kethvara watched the images flash past. She saw terrible things, yes, but she also saw something else. Something the elders seemed to have missed. "Look again," she said quietly. "Look at what happens after the destruction." Zorvith paused the display. The image froze on a ruined city. Buildings collapsed and smoking. "Watch," Kethvara said. The display continued. And slowly, the city began to change. Workers appeared, clearing rubble. New buildings rose from the ashes. Children played in parks that had been bomb craters just years before. Life returned, stubborn and persistent. "They fall," Kethvara said. "They always fall. But they always get back up. That is what you missed in your records. That is what you failed to understand." Zorvith's form darkened. "Pretty words. But words do not change what they are. Words do not make them safe." He gestured, and new data appeared on the display. It showed the horizon, the human ship, and a technical analysis of its design. They received a single transmission, Zorvith said. One message containing coordinates and a carrier wave. From that carrier wave alone, they extracted the principles of faster-than-light travel. They built a working jump drive in 6 months. No other species has achieved faster-than-light travel in less than 10,000 years of development. They did it in half a year. The chamber fell silent. Kethvara felt a chill run down her spine. She had known humans were remarkable, but this was something else entirely. They are not just dangerous because they fight, Zorvith continued. They are dangerous because they learn. They adapt. They grow. 100 years ago, they had not even reached their own moon. Now, they are here, sitting in our station, waiting to see what we will do. How long before they surpass us entirely? Kethvara opened her mouth to respond, but a new voice cut through the silence. Maybe you should ask us. Every eye in the chamber turned toward the entrance. Lisa Monroe stood there, flanked by 2 guards who looked uncertain about their duty. Behind her stood Danny Ortiz and Maria Santos, their human faces strange and alien among the gathered species. You were confined to your quarters, Zorvith said. We got bored, Lisa replied. She walked forward, ignoring the guards, ignoring the stairs, ignoring the ancient beings who watched her with a mix of fear and fascination. She stopped beside Kethvara and looked up at the council. You've spent this whole trial talking about us, she said. Showing old videos, reading old reports, but you haven't actually talked to us. Don't you think that's a little unfair? Zorvith's form pulsed with agitation. You have no right to speak here. I have every right. You're deciding whether to kill one of the only beings in this galaxy brave enough to reach out to us. I'd say that gives me a pretty big stake in this conversation. Lisa turned to face the crowd. Thousands of alien eyes watched her, waiting to see what this strange creature would do. Yes, we're violent, she said. We fight. We destroy. We've done terrible things to each other and to our world. All of that is true, but it's not the whole truth. She paused, gathering her thoughts. We also love. We create. We build things that last for centuries. We write music and poetry and stories. We care for our sick and bury our dead. We look up at the stars and wonder what's out there. We dream of being better than we are. Our voice grew stronger, filling the chamber. You sealed us away because you were afraid. I understand that. But fear is a terrible reason to hide from the universe. Fear keeps you small. Fear keeps you alone. And if there's one thing humans have learned in our short history, it's that we are always stronger together. She looked directly at Zorvith. Kethvara took a risk. She broke your law, but she also gave us a chance. A chance to prove that we're more than the worst parts of our history. Don't throw that chance away. The chamber was silent. Kethvara felt tears forming in her eyes. No one had ever spoken for her people like this. No one had ever believed in anything so strongly. Zorvith was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before. The trial will continue tomorrow, he said. The humans will be allowed to present their case. This session is adjourned. As the crowd began to disperse, Lisa turned to Kethvara and smiled. Thank you, Kethvara whispered. You did not have to do that. Lisa shrugged. Sure I did. We humans have to stick together. And right now, you're the closest thing we've got to a friend in this galaxy. Kethvara felt something warm bloom in her chest. Hope. She had almost forgotten what it felt like. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tomorrow the fate of 2 species would be decided. But for now, in this moment, Kethvara allowed herself to believe that everything might turn out all right. The alarm came without warning. One moment, the station was quiet and peaceful. The next, Red lights were flashing in every corridor, and sirens screamed through the metal walls. Lisa woke instantly. 15 years of military training had taught her to go from sleep to full alertness in seconds. She was on her feet and dressed before the first siren finished its cycle. "What's happening?" Danny asked, stumbling out of his own quarters. "I don't know," Lisa said. "But it's not good." They found Zorvith on the command deck, his crystalline form flickering with patterns Lisa had never seen before. Around him, dozens of alien officers worked frantically at their stations. Fear hung in the air like a physical thing. "What is it?" Lisa demanded. Zorvith turned to face her. For the first time since they had met, he looked old, tired, afraid. "The Krethax," he said. "They have returned." The main display showed a map of the galaxy. Red dots were spreading across it like a disease, swallowing system after system. Each dot represented a world that had gone silent, its communications cut off, its people consumed. "We thought they were extinct," Zorvith continued. "1,000 years ago, we drove them into the void between galaxies. We believed they would die in the darkness. We were wrong." Lisa studied the map. The red dots were moving fast, faster than should have been possible. They were heading straight for the heart of Concord space. "What are they?" she asked. "A hive mind," Zorvith said. "Billions of individual creatures, all connected to a single consciousness. They do not negotiate. They do not trade. They do not communicate. They only consume. There must be a way to stop them." Zorvith's light dimmed. "We have tried. The first fleet we sent against them was destroyed in minutes. The second lasted only slightly longer. They adapt to our weapons before we can fire a second shot. They learn our tactics faster than we can change them. They are coming, and we have nothing that can slow them down." Lisa felt the weight of his words settle on her shoulders. She looked at Danny, at Maria, at the handful of humans who had followed her across the stars. They had come here looking for answers, looking for connection. Now they were trapped in the middle of an extinction event. "Show me the battle footage," she said. Zorvith hesitated, then gestured to one of his officers. The display changed, showing recorded images of the first battle. Lisa watched as Concord warships formed perfect lines, firing in synchronized volleys at the approaching swarm. It was beautiful, disciplined, elegant. It was also completely ineffective. The Krethax absorbed the first volley without slowing. By the second volley, they had already adapted. Their outer shell shifted, becoming reflective. Energy weapons bounced off harmlessly. The Concord ships tried to retreat, but the swarm was faster. It surrounded them, broke through their shields, and tore them apart from the inside. The whole battle lasted less than 4 minutes. "You're fighting them wrong," Danny said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. The young officer was staring at the display with intense concentration, his eyes moving back and forth as if he was solving a puzzle in his head. "What do you mean?" Zorvith asked. Danny stepped forward. "You're trying to match their strength with your own. You form perfect lines. You fire in perfect coordination. Everything is precise and predictable." He shook his head. "That's exactly what they want. They're a hive mind. They think as one. They can predict patterns and adapt to them instantly. Then what would you suggest?" Zorvith's voice was skeptical, but Lisa could hear something else beneath it. Desperation. Danny smiled. It was not a comforting smile. It was the smile of someone who had just figured out how to win an impossible fight. "We cheat," he said. "The plan took 3 days to develop." Danny worked without sleep, surrounded by human engineers and confused alien scientists. Lisa watched him draw diagrams, explain concepts, and argue with anyone who challenged his ideas. The Concord species did not understand what he was proposing. They believed in order, in rules, in doing things the proper way. The idea of deliberate chaos, of unpredictable attack patterns, of sacrificing ships to create openings, was completely foreign to them, but humans had been fighting dirty for thousands of years. It was in their blood. The key is the hive mind itself, Danny explained to the assembled commanders. Every Krethax drone is connected to the central consciousness. They share thoughts, sensations, commands. It makes them incredibly coordinated. But it's also a weakness. He pulled up a technical schematic. If we can disrupt that connection, even temporarily, the drones will become confused. They'll lose their coordination. They'll be vulnerable. How do we disrupt the connection? One of the alien commanders asked. We're working on that, Danny said. My engineers think they can build a device that generates a specific frequency. It won't kill the Krethax, but it will sever the link between the drones and the hive mind. Without that link, they're just animals. Zorvith studied the schematic. This device would need to be deployed at close range. Inside the swarm itself. Yes, Danny said. That would be suicide. Danny nodded. We know. The chamber fell silent. Lisa saw understanding dawn on the faces of the assembled aliens. They were not just looking at a battle plan. They were looking at a sacrifice. You cannot ask this of your people, Zorvith said. Lisa stepped forward. We're not asking. We're volunteering. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every species present. You've spent 12,000 years trying to decide if we're dangerous. Well, here's your answer. Yes, we're dangerous. We're the most dangerous thing you've ever met. But we're not dangerous to you. She pointed at the map, at the spreading tide of red that threatened to consume everything. We're dangerous to them. And right now, that's exactly what you need. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in Concord history, humans would fight alongside the allied species. They would lead the most dangerous part of the mission, flying straight into the heart of the swarm to deploy the disruptor devices. 300 volunteers stepped forward. Every single member of the Horizon crew was among them. Lisa would command the diversionary fleet, drawing the swarm's attention while the attack teams moved into position. It was a desperate plan. The odds of survival were almost zero, but it was the only chance they had. On the night before the battle, Lisa found Kethvara standing alone at an observation window. The stars stretched out before them, cold and distant and beautiful. Are you afraid? Kethvara asked. Lisa considered the question. Yes, she admitted. But I've been afraid before. Fear doesn't stop you from doing what needs to be done. Kethvara turned to face her. Why are you doing this? You could leave. Take your ship and return to Earth. The Krethax will take years to reach your system. You could have a whole lifetime before they come. Lisa shook her head. That's not who we are. We don't run from fights. We don't leave people behind. And we definitely don't wait around for monsters to show up at our door. She put a hand on Kethvara's shoulder. You took a chance on us. You believed we could be more than our history. Tomorrow, we're going to prove you right. Kethvara felt tears running down her blue cheeks. I will remember you, she whispered. Whatever happens, I will make sure the galaxy remembers what you did. Lisa smiled. Then make it a good story. She turned and walked away, toward the hangar where her ship was waiting. Tomorrow, she would fly into the heart of darkness. Tomorrow, she would show the galaxy what humans were made of. And tomorrow, one way or another, everything would change. The swarm filled the sky like a living storm. Billions of Krethax drones moved as one, their bodies blocking out the stars. At the center of the mass, hidden beneath layers of writhing flesh and metal, the hive mind pulsed with cold intelligence. It had consumed 100 worlds. It would consume 100 more, but first, it had to get past the humans. Lisa gripped the controls of her fighter as she led the diversionary fleet into battle. Around her, 200 human pilots flew in perfect chaos. They did not form lines. They did not follow patterns. They darted and weaved and spun through space like leaves caught in a hurricane. "All wings, this is Monroe," she said into her communicator. "Remember the plan. Keep moving. Stay unpredictable. And for the love of everything, don't die before the attack teams get into position." The swarm surged toward them. Lisa watched the massive creatures approach, feeling the familiar cold of fear settle in her stomach. Then she pushed the fear aside and flew straight into the heart of the enemy. The Krethax had never faced anything like this. Their hive mind tried to predict the human movements, to anticipate their tactics, to adapt as it had adapted to every enemy before. But the humans refused to be predictable. They changed direction without warning. They sacrificed perfect shots for confusing angles. They did things that made no tactical sense, simply because no tactical sense meant no pattern to exploit. Lisa's fighter twisted through a gap in the swarm, her weapons firing in every direction. She hit a dozen drones, then a dozen more. But for every creature she destroyed, 10 more took its place. The swarm was endless, and she was very, very small. "Commander, I'm hit." A voice crackled through her communicator. Tony Martinez, one of her best pilots. "Tony, report. Engine's gone. I'm not going to make it out." His voice was calm, steady. "But I can still fly straight. Give me a target." Lisa felt her heart break, but she kept her voice steady. "There's a dense cluster at bearing 275. Take out as many as you can." "Copy that, Commander." "It's been an honor." Martinez's fighter accelerated toward the cluster. Lisa watched the tiny dot of light disappear into the mass of enemies. A moment later, a bright explosion lit up the darkness. "All wings, Martinez is down," Lisa said. "Make his sacrifice count." The battle raged on. One by one, the human pilots fell. Each death bought precious seconds, precious minutes for the attack teams to get into position. Lisa watched her numbers drop and forced herself to keep fighting. Meanwhile, Danny Ortiz led the assault teams deep into the heart of the swarm. 53 fighters carrying the disruptor devices, each one piloted by a volunteer who knew they probably would not survive. They flew in tight formation, protected by the chaos of the diversionary fleet. "All teams, check in," Danny said. Voices responded one by one. Sarah Cole, Marcus Wright, Jenny Park, Roberto Diaz. Good people. Brave people. People who had chosen to fly into certain death because it was the right thing to do. "Approaching the core," Danny announced. "Prepare for deployment." The hive mind sensed them coming. It was old and intelligent and recognized the threat. Drones broke away from the battle to intercept the assault teams. They swarmed around the human fighters, trying to overwhelm them with sheer numbers. The first attack team went down. Then the second. Then the third. "Keep pushing," Danny shouted. "We're almost there." Sarah Cole's voice came through the static. "Danny, I'm not going to make it to the core, but I can deploy early. It might be enough to create an opening." "Sarah, no. Tell my family I love them." A fighter detonated. The disruptor device activated, sending a wave of energy rippling through the swarm. For a brief moment, the drones in that sector went silent. Their connection to the hive mind was severed. They drifted aimlessly, confused and alone. The moment lasted only seconds. But seconds were enough. Danny flew through the gap Sarah had created, his fighter screaming toward the core of the swarm. Around him, the remaining assault teams did the same. They were taking hits, losing ships, watching their friends die. But they kept going. The core was unlike anything Danny had ever seen. It was a mass of organic tissue and stolen technology, pulsing with the consciousness of the hive mind. It looked at Danny through 1,000 eyes, and for a moment, He felt its ancient hunger pressing against his mind. All teams deploy now. The surviving pilots activated their devices simultaneously. Waves of disruptive energy crashed into the hive mind like tidal waves against a cliff. The core shuddered. The 1,000 eyes flickered. And then, slowly, the connection between the hive mind and its drones began to fail. Danny felt the change immediately. The coordinated attacks became chaotic. The perfect swarm movements dissolved into confusion. Billions of drones suddenly found themselves alone, cut off from the guiding intelligence that had controlled their every action. "It's working!" Danny shouted. "All Concord forces, attack now!" The combined fleet of the Galactic Concord swept in from every direction. They had been waiting at the edges of the battle, watching the humans sacrifice themselves. Now they fired everything they had at the confused and vulnerable swarm. The battle was not quick. It was not clean. Millions of drones still fought with animal ferocity, lashing out at anything that moved. But without the hive mind to coordinate them, they were no longer an unstoppable force. They were just creatures mortal and alone. Lisa Monroe watched from the bridge of a Concorde medical ship. Her fighter had been destroyed in the final push, and she had been pulled from the wreckage with broken bones and burned skin. But she was alive. Somehow, impossibly, she was still alive. "How many did we lose?" she asked. The medic hesitated. 247 of your people. From the assault teams, only 6 made it back." Lisa closed her eyes. 247. People she had known, trained with, laughed with, gone. She wanted to cry, to scream, to break something. But there would be time for grief later. Right now, she had a duty. The Krethax? Destroyed. The hive mind is gone. The remaining drones are being eliminated. The galaxy is safe. Safe. Such a small word for such a massive thing. Lisa let out a breath she had been holding for what felt like days. The door to the medical bay opened. Zorvith drifted in, his crystalline form dimmer than usual. He stopped beside Lisa's bed and looked down at her with something that might have been respect. "You did what we could not," he said. "You saved us all." Lisa shook her head. "I didn't save anyone. I just watched my people die. They did not die meaninglessly. They died so that trillions could live. That is the most meaningful death anyone could ask for." Lisa thought about Tony Martinez flying into that cluster without hesitation. About Sarah Cole deploying early so others could reach the core. About all the pilots who had followed her into an impossible fight and never come back. "They were good people," she said quietly. "They deserved better." "Perhaps," Zorvith agreed. "But they chose this. They chose to sacrifice themselves for others. That is something my people have never truly understood. We preserve ourselves. We calculate risks. We do what is logical and safe." He paused. "You do what is right, even when it costs you everything." Lisa finally allowed herself to smile. It was a small, sad smile, but it was real. "That's just who we are," she said. "We're human." Zorvith was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than Lisa had ever heard it. "Perhaps we sealed you away for the wrong reasons," he said. "We feared what you could destroy. But we should have seen what you could build, what you could save." He extended one crystalline limb toward her. It was the first time he had ever offered any human a gesture of friendship. "Welcome to the galaxy, humanity. We are glad you finally woke up." Lisa reached out and touched the offered limb. The crystal was cool against her burned skin, but the meaning behind the gesture was warm. "Thank you," she said. "We're glad to be here." Outside the medical bay windows, the stars shone bright and clear. The war was over. The swarm was gone. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, a new chapter was beginning. Humanity had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same. 10 years later, Lisa Monroe retired to a small house on Earth's coast. She watched the waves crash against the shore and thought about all the friends she had lost. But she also thought about the worlds those friends had saved, the lives that continued because of their sacrifice. Kethvara visited her often. The Vorani ambassador had become humanity's greatest champion, traveling from world to world telling the story of the battle that saved the galaxy. She was old now, her blue skin fading to silver, but her eyes still sparkled with the same curiosity that had started everything. "They're putting up a monument," Kethvara said one evening, watching the sunset with Lisa. "On the station where we first met. They're going to carve the names of everyone who died. And at the base, they're going to write the words you said to Zorvith." Lisa smiled. "Which words?" "That's just who we are. We're human." Lisa looked out at the ocean, at the waves that had been crashing against this shore since long before humanity existed. She thought about everything they had been through, everything they had lost, everything they had gained. "Not bad," she said finally. "Not bad at all." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Somewhere out there, among the stars, humanity was building new futures, making new friends, and proving every day that the elders had